Welcome back to another Stand on Guard live question period with David Krayden. That's me, your host. Thanks for coming back today. Doesn't look like we had too many folks waiting in line here. Not even a single comment today. What is YouTube doing to me now? Come on aboard. We're here. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Monday is not always the best day for question period, and sorry we missed your Friday. I hope you had a chance to watch that interview I did with Michael Cooper, Conservative MP from St. Albert, Edmonton. I thought it was going to be an ordinary interview, and I'd never expect too much, even though the Kyle Kemper interview went through the roof. I never expect a lot from interviews because I consider them part of the job. That's what makes me a journalist. That's what differentiates this broadcast from a lot of those yokels out there who are just showing you manufactured, recycled clips. They never go out and interview people. They never talk to anybody. They don't do any news stories. They can't write. And they just simply recycle other people's material. That's what separates this broadcast from others. So I don't always expect a lot. I do them because it's what we need to do. But the interview with Michael Cooper was actually the biggest interview I've ever had on YouTube. And it's still continuing to climb. And he talked, of course, about Speaker Greg Fergus preparing to throw Pierre Poilievre out of the House of Commons. And I think that's what must have done it. He's also doing a bang-up job investigating Randy Boissonnault, the employment minister, and another Edmonton MP, Edmonton Centre MP. So I think that's going to be an ongoing story. I'm hoping this week to get Rachel Thomas on to talk about her constant conflict with CBC President Catherine Tate, where she's trying to assess whether or not Catherine Tate's going to get a bonus, an executive bonus this year. And of course, Tate is dancing on roller skates with this, and it's quite embarrassing. I just want to show you a brief clip from their last confrontation, and I can't wait to ask Rachel Thomas a very direct question in terms of, does Catherine Tate think she deserves an executive bonus this year? As badly as CBC has done, as much more public money that it's gobbling up, does she think she deserves another huge bonus for the work she's doing? I think she should ask her that. Not whether or not she thinks she's going to get one, but does she think she deserves one? Be a good question. Let's have a look at this clip.
For you. That it's interesting to me because you're saying that these are the metrics, but actually the viewership of the CBC is cut in half since you took leadership in 2018. It's come down by half. So it's interesting to me that you're giving bonuses or performance awards when in fact the CBC is performing the poorest it's ever performed. So bonuses keep going up, they keep skyrocketing, but performance, as you say, the bonuses are granted based on.
I really, if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to correct the record, if I may.
Yeah, correct the record, if I may. Actually, she has nothing to correct. The CBC viewership is plummeting. So what the hell are they getting bonuses for? What is anybody in that Crown Corporation getting a bonus for? They're not doing good work at that level. I maintain there are good journalists at CBC. I was very good friends with Julie Van Dusen when she was working for CBC and I was working on the Hill. I thought she was a damn good reporter and she wasn't afraid to ask tough questions of liberals in the same way she asked tough questions of conservatives. That's what a journalist is supposed to be. Not in the bag, not in the pocket of politicians, but unafraid to ask questions. And I hope I'm never stray from that path either. I'm not here to tell you that this party is never going to make mistakes and just, if they do, ignore them. No, they make mistakes. I'm going to call them out. I don't care if I happen to agree with a lot of their policy. If they are going in the wrong ideological direction, I'm going to call them out. And that's what a journalist should do. But yes, there are good journalists at CBC. There's a lot of bad executives at CBC who are driving that corporation into the ground despite $1.4 billion every year of taxpayer money, and despite the fact they get ad revenue from the same source as everybody else in the media world, namely advertising. So I want to talk briefly about something else. I'm going to do a broadcast on this later this week. And that's the growth of the public sector. It's not a great graphic, but the purple on this, if you want to call it a graph, that represents the public sector. The blue, the light blue, represents the private sector. Notice over the years how the purple has eclipsed the light blue, the sky blue, over the years. And under Justin Trudeau's reign, it's gone mad. It's gone crazy. It's because this prime minister has hired more public servants, more bureaucrats than any other prime minister in history. He is in a class by himself for hiring government workers. The public sector is in danger of overpowering the private sector. Now, what's that called? It's called communism. When that happens, when more people work for the government than work for the private sector, that's when you start to go down a road to communism, where in a system like that, everybody works for the government and nobody works for the private sector. That's where Canada is headed. I'm sorry, folks, but that's where Justin Trudeau is taking us. Yes, indeed. So when you see these reports about jobs in Canada and the employment rate going up, it's because it's all going to the public sector. These aren't real jobs. This does not indicate a healthy economy. This indicates a febrile economy, a diseased economy that is completely contingent upon government spending. So that is where Justin Trudeau is taking us with his jobs. It's all about jobs in the public sector. It's been that way since he became prime minister. It's gotten worse in the last couple of years, and he actually now spends twice as much as he takes in. That's why the deficit continues to be at least $40 billion a year, and that's why the national debt continues to balloon into the trillions. And it's going to continue to do that as long as we have a government that continues to spend money like, I hate to use the old adage, like it grows on trees. Or he spends money like water. Anyway, I will be addressing that further this week. I think it's worth talking about. And we're going to go back to question period now, which I think started right on time. Amazing. And Greg Fergus is taking the day off. So a lot of folks are going to say, hey, where's Greg? Where's Fergie? Where's the speaker? He's retired, right? He resigned? No way. Not with the support of Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, with the support of the Liberal government and its coalition partner, the NDP. He will be here until hell freezes over, or until we have another election and can get rid of this guy. Because the Conservative Party is really not in a position to get rid of him, even with the support of the blockheads. So I'm going to go to question period now. I will be, of course, commenting as required. Enjoy your comments. I'll post them as you make them. If I miss, I can't always get everybody's comments up because I'm alone here in the studio. Sometimes people wonder, what happened to the sound? Well, I'm doing all of my own logistic work, and sometimes it becomes a little overwhelming. I will try not to make that sound mistake again. But thanks for watching today, folks, and let's have some fun.
The rent guarantee income
Sound
subsidy
on.
to some of the homes under the federal government's bilateral agreement with provinces. Nonprofits are forced to jack up the rent to market rates after the existing tenants move out. That means thousands of affordable homes will be lost forever.
The white stuff on Krayden's face was a little cream. I'm sorry about that, folks. Forgot I had it on.
From the housing
Thanks.
crisis that they helped create. Already, between successive Liberal and Conservative governments, Canada has lost more than 1 million affordable
You can see I
homes.
had a little cut up here last week, and
Canada cannot
I'm just still recovering from that. So anyway, you don't need to know that much about me, but I don't mind sharing.
This giving with the right and taking with the left sleight of hand will fool no one. The housing crisis will only get worse, and the Liberals will have no one to blame but themselves. The rent geared to income subsidies must continue.
Honorable député de Drummond.
Madame la Présidente.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. Madam Speaker, Drummond's Volunteer Action Centre is celebrating its 45th birthday, and I was there to celebrate it. The room was full of people, generous volunteers who make calls, support people, bring vulnerable individuals and seniors to their medical appointments. They support people who are going through tumultuous periods in their lives. Last year, they helped 14,000 people and 200 organizations with 37,000 hours of volunteer work. They care deeply about people. We're so lucky to have them. This organization has been working for 45 years. It does so much. It has a tax clinic, a Meals on Wheels service, and volunteers are at the very heart of what the organization does.
Yes, I'm okay, for those of you asking.
They create friendships,
Thank
help
you.
people, and inspire the entire community. Happy birthday. Thank you for being there to help people in our community.
The Honourable Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Speaker, Newfoundland and Labrador has contributed much to our great Dominion, but few gifts from the Rock rival that of the now departed Rex Murphy. Inspired by his firm belief
I
that
missed
Canada's
Rex
founded on
already.
great principles, had achieved great things in the past, and could and should do much more in the future, Rex stood on guard for all of us with great wit and wisdom throughout his many newspaper columns and on-air commentaries. Rex was brave, but without pretense. He despised the smug. He understood and championed everyday Canadians, especially those who struggled. He appreciated the inherent fallen nature of humankind, as well as our ability to rise above our failings through the pursuit of virtue. God bless Canada, God bless Newfoundland and Labrador, and God bless the soul of Raphael Rex Murphy.
Yeah, he was a real good columnist and rare amongst Canadian columnists.
Is Chrysalis, the first book by Hamilton Mountain's own Anuja Varghese. It won a Governor General's Literary Award, a
I see we're going
Trust
over
Award,
time
and
for
several
member
other
statements
honors.
again.
It's a book dedicated to, quote, all the girls and women who don't see themselves in most stories. You are worthy of reflection despite what you've been told. And Speaker, it's a really
Anyway,
fun
Colleen,
read.
I hope you had a
Anuja
chance
told
to
me she's
watch
always
my
looking for ways to
broadcast
empower
on
women
the
and
World
girls, and
Health
sometimes that
Organization
means you get
and
to
the
be a
pandemic
shapeshifter
treaty
and eat your
and where
enemies.
that is.
She says fantasy fiction helps
I
us let
broadcast
loose,
that
wonder what if, and consider difficult
Saturday
subjects
night,
like racism,
Sunday
homophobia,
yesterday.
and misogyny
Have a look; it's
in
doing quite well.
stories rather than statistics.
And
Anuja
we need to
unleashed
support
her inner writer when she moved
the
to
people
Hamilton
who are
and found the
doing
community
anything
that
at all
inspired her and
to
the
prevent
support
this
that
treaty
helped
from
her
becoming a
flourish.
reality
I
in
want
Canada.
to congratulate Anuja on her
And
success.
I think that's
Thank her for the delicious stories and tell her Hamilton is very
I think
glad
that's very important.
she now calls our city
Like
home.
Leslyn Lewis, the Toronto area member of Parliament, she's doing a great job. Time to shut up.
After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the drugs, disorder, and death. Open access to meth and fentanyl is killing Canadians. BC parents are terrified that children will step on dirty needles on soccer fields. Nurses are breathing in fentanyl smoke as they treat patients in hospitals. On May 21st, Parliament will vote on our motion to ensure this extremist drug experiment is never repeated. Will the Prime Minister vote to reject expansion and prioritize treatment and recovery? Yes or no?
Roger, that's a stupid statement, and don't make another one like it today.
Too many Canadians are dying every day from an ever-changing illegal toxic drug supply. The opposition leader talks about investing in treatment, but Conservatives cut 2/3 of drug treatment fund when they were last in government. Let's talk about what saves lives. Safe consumption sites, accessible social and health care
right,
services,
Greg.
prevention,
You're
treatment,
right.
and harm reduction. This is a public health crisis, not a criminal justice issue.
The member for South Surrey Whitecross.
Well, after 9 years, Madam Speaker, it's on them, and they have
Is there
to
nobody
do
there
something
today?
about it. The Liberal leadership race is well underway, I see, and it seems like the new guy is just like the old guy. Mark Carney testified at the Senate, and surprise, surprise, he announced his support for this Prime Minister's failed carbon tax. Carbon tax Carney couldn't commit to cutting a penny from the Prime Minister's reckless spending. These random Liberals really have a lot in common. If carbon tax Carney won't, and this Prime Minister won't, will someone over there have Canadians' backs and axe the tax?
Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, if we're going to talk about having Canadians' backs, let's talk about the work that we're doing to protect the environment while making the life more affordable for them through the carbon rebates. In fact, if you look at economists, and over 300 economists have signed a letter stating this very fact, Canadians receive more on average through the rebate than they pay through any carbon pricing. In fact, in Ontario, the average family at the end of the year has $300 more through the carbon rebate. I'm listening to the economists, and I'm seeing it standing up and having the backs for Canadians.
Honourable member for South Surrey White Rock.
Well, I'm listening to the parliamentary budget officer who says the exact opposite to what that member just said. Inflationary budgets destroy the working class with high interest rates.
That's
After
true.
9 years, mortgages, down payments, rents have all doubled. 90% of young Canadians are stuck in housing hell with their dreams of home ownership shattered. Those who do own fear they can't qualify for renewal. Mortgage delinquencies are up 50% overall, 135% in Ontario, 62% in BC. This is
All Parliamentary Secretary.
No, that's ridiculous. There's nobody there today.
If the member opposite wants
It
to
looks
talk
like the
about
end
what
of June,
parliamentary budget
not
officer
mid-May.
said, he said 8 out of 10 families end up with more money at the end of the year through the carbon rebates, through the carbon price. But also, if we're going to talk about protecting homes, at the very moment that houses were burning in Kelowna Lake Country from climate crisis fires, wildfires, that member was opposing the carbon price. The carbon price that actually results
And what were they?
in a
Why were the
third
fires
of our
burning? I
emissions.
think it was arson, lady.
The honourable member for
Stop blaming climate change.
Madam Speaker, the Governor of the Bank of Canada has repeatedly confirmed that the Prime Minister's spending is keeping interest rates high. Many mortgage holders will face sharp increases in payments when they renew their mortgages over the next couple of years. This is the direct result of this Prime Minister's $500 billion in centralizing inflationary spending backed by the Bloc. When will the Prime Minister and the Bloc stop their out-of-control spending? The Honourable Minister, my colleague, talks about sound management and what was the record of the Conservative leader when he was housing minister? He got 6 affordable housing units built, whereas in my colleague's riding over the past year, hundreds of units have been built. We signed a historic agreement with the government of Quebec. The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Madam Speaker, the minister's been repeating the same infantile answer while the Liberal government has doubled the cost of housing. July 1st is shaping up to be a disaster for those looking for a place to live. One of the local organizations says that we're heading for the worst July 1st of our lives. This Bloc-backed government has created disastrous economic conditions for people looking for housing. Will the Prime Minister shape up and stop the inflationary spending that's only putting pressure on the economy and on Canadians? The Honourable Minister. Good morning.
Arson was the
Madam
cause
Speaker.
of most of
We're
these
talking
fires.
He
I
talked
did a
about
lot of
childish
pieces on this for the
calculations.
post-millennial.
Well, yeah, this is an easy one.
So.
Counting to 6. 6 affordable
I'm not sure
housing
these guys
units
can count to
is what
6.
the Conservative leader
quite a
managed
task.
to get built in his tenure as housing minister. So talk about childish.
Yeah, I think
whereas 222 units have been built in the members' riding in cooperation with the government in Quebec.
Yes, it looks like Roger came back in another incarnation here. If this continues,
Madam Speaker, the unfortunate
we
thing
do
about the
not
member for
speak ill
Glengarry
of the
Prescott
dead on
Russell's
this
insults
network.
is that they hindered
And
opportunities
if this
for
continues,
substantive conversations about French. While he publicly
I will
humiliated himself,
discontinue it.
the report of the Commissioner of Official Languages went almost unnoticed. But the Commissioner severely criticized the federal government, calling it reluctant to offer services in French, and reluctant about allowing Francophones to work in their own language. Instead of insulting Quebecers, shouldn't the Liberals have announced this week that they're finally going to force the federal government to respect Francophones? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, on this side of the House, we've always been there for Francophones in Canada and in Quebec. And I find it really interesting coming from my colleague, because when the Bloc tries to monopolize this file, they're bothered by the fact that our government and my colleague from Glengarry Prescott Russell, all the Liberals on this side who are from Quebec, and I would say our whole caucus even, defends French in Quebec and all across the country. We're the only government that does that. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan.
No, the Bloc should not be a federal party. It's not a federal party.
His 15 minutes of fame
it's
to
a bunch of treasonous
denying the
bastards.
decline of French in Quebec. An odd choice.
That's what I always say.
At a time when the Commissioner of Official Languages is pointing out that in his region along the Ottawa River, that's where he gets the most complaints from.
If you want to be a treasonous bastard, go back to Quebec and be one. But don't sit in the House of Commons. I've been saying that since the Bloc entered Parliament 2 decades ago now. No, actually longer. How long have they been there? 3 decades now.
If the Liberals don't
Seems like yesterday.
French seriously,
no, we do not need the Bloc there.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, rather. Let's talk about our government.
So I'm glad so many of you agree with that, because it's
action plan. 1.4 billion.
If you're trying to break up a country, you don't sit in their federal legislature and do so. You go back to your province and agitate.
The only government that has acknowledged the decline in French. We've modernized the Official Languages Act.
Here they go. All I want to talk about is promoting the French language anyway. They rarely ever have a decent point.
The issue here on this side of the House, we believe in French. They don't.
I always say when the South seceded from the Union, did all of those congressmen and senators stay in the White, stay in the House of Representatives in the U.S. Senate? No, they all left. They all went back to their individual states. And that's what the Bloc do, because they want to secede from Canada. Well, then go back to Quebec and agitate there. Stop wasting our time sitting in the House of Commons, doing not the nation's business, but one province's business.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I agree with the Honourable Member that it's certainly hypocritical for Conservatives to cite food bank lineups as something that they care about when voting against the National School Food Program that's going to feed over 400,000 kids per year. That's hypocritical if I've ever heard it before. But
well, you guys know all about hypocrisy.
Member or my colleague in the NDP party, who we've worked with successfully to update our Competition Act in successive rounds, which are going to improve prices for Canadians and increase competition, which is, I think, vitally important.
Great answer.
Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Madam Speaker, rent is going up faster than Canadians can afford, with families relying on credit cards more and more to buy food and necessities. In my riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith, rent went up over 9% last year alone. People can't cut back any more than they already are. Yet the Liberals are sitting on their hands and letting corporate greed drive up costs. This plan is not working. When will the Liberals have the courage to crack down on the corporate greed driving up rent and food prices?
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague for the question, and I point to the recent federal budget where we announced that we would be taking measures to prevent corporate landowners from buying up single-family homes, but also advancing measures to protect renters and to bring down the cost of rent by adding more supply. We are moving forward with programs that introduce low-cost financing for more rental construction. We've got new subsidies for affordable housing and cooperative housing and an acquisition for nonprofits who can actually take affordable homes and keep them affordable in perpetuity. In addition, Madam Speaker, we're moving forward with a Renters' Bill of Rights and a series of other measures that are designed to protect the interest of renters for whom the cost of living has simply become too high.
The honourable member for Central Okanagan, Similkin in Nicola.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, finding an affordable rental is only getting harder. Despite their record spending, a new report says that rents in Canada increased 9.3% annually in April. It's gotten so bad that people seeking an affordable rental, their only choice, Madam Speaker, is to laugh or cry. Given the dire situation of these renters, could the Minister of Housing please enlighten us as to whether he considers the performance of his government's housing strategy a comedy of errors or a tragedy of oversights?
I think it's more a tragedy. What do you guys think?
Madam Speaker, if my honourable friend is interested in a tragedy of oversights, I would direct him to the plan put forward by his leader when it comes to housing, which doesn't advance a single measure designed to help renters with the cost of living. Madam Speaker, his plan that he is now campaigning on would literally increase taxes on rental construction in this country by putting the GST back on those construction projects. We have removed the GST, Madam Speaker. We have introduced low-cost financing
Thank
to
you
build more rental supply
very
to
much,
bring down the
P.O.,
cost
for your
across the
kind words. I enjoy doing Redacted every
In
week.
addition, Madam Speaker,
So many
we bring
people
more money on the table to provide affordable
see me
housing
there.
options with the Conservative.
And I try to represent Canada the best way I can. Although there's always a lunatic every week who thinks he can do it better.
Election, so I don't think that promise is worth the paper the minister is written on. This week, the Bank of Canada warned, and I quote, higher debt servicing costs reduce a household's financial flexibility, making them more financially vulnerable if their income declines or they face an unexpected material expense, end quote. Considering the Prime Minister has doubled our debt and has borrowed more money than all Canadian Prime Ministers combined, could he please explain how this warning does not equally apply to his government?
The Honourable Minister.
No, Donna M. Nobody has complained about the election being stalled for a week so these MPs can collect their pensions. When it comes to money, these folks all stick together very closely.
The construction of nearly 500,000 units since the inception
Very
of the
true.
National Housing Strategy. But, Madam Speaker, he seems to ignore the fact that Canada maintains one of the healthiest fiscal positions amongst advanced economies. I expect he's trying to distract because they've had a very bad week when Canadians are focused on their use of the notwithstanding clause to erode important rights that are protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Madam Speaker, we will move
Oh, Jennifer,
forward
that's wonderful to hear. Thank you. Because I know Clayton does his best to advertise my channel. He's very generous that way. He's a marvelous guy.
Skyrocketing inflation, which caused higher
And a
interest
great
rates,
journalist
which is
with
causing
a
higher
wealth of
mortgage
experience.
payments. The Bank of Canada confirmed
Better
that
shut
the
up.
Prime Minister's wasteful spending is keeping interest rates higher for longer. Now the Bank of Canada is warning, when compared with origination, that the average median mortgage payment will rise more than 20% in 2025 and 30% in 2026. Families can't afford this. Will this government stop their deficit spending so families can keep their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, what I would like to ask the member opposite who just asked that question is how does she face her constituents when at the very time that homes were being evacuated, people were losing homes to climate-induced wildfires, she was fighting the price on carbon pollution and fighting our work on making sure that we fight climate change. This is what's actually putting homes at risk. We're going to be supporting our firefighters who are fighting those fires. We're going to be doing what we need to fight climate change, and we are protecting Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna
What are you
Lake Country.
protecting Canadians
Well,
from?
Madam Speaker, after 9 years,
Nothing.
this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost. For families with variable rate
I'm
mortgages with
glad
fixed
you all like
payments,
Redacted.
it's even worse. Median mortgage payments will increase 60% by 2026. Working class paychecks have been shredded by this NDP Liberal government. Common sense Conservatives would bring in a dollar for dollar law to fund $1 of savings for every new dollar spent. This is how families run their households. Can the minister explain how Canadian families are supposed to come up with hundreds or thousands of dollars more a month just to keep their homes?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister.
Just to pay the
We
taxes.
understand the very serious challenges that families are facing when it comes to the cost of housing, which is why we put a plan on the table that's designed to solve Canada's national housing crisis. What's fascinating about
Yes,
the member's
Christine,
own
thank you for
riding,
that.
we've actually invested $31.5 million in that community to build thousands of homes, which she and her party oppose. Moreover, the Conservative plan lists only 22 communities in the entire country that can benefit from their plans. Kelowna is not on the list. I hope she has a hard time explaining that to her
True.
constituents who thanked us
We
for the
need
investment we made to
protection from
build
the
housing
climate
in her
change
community.
cultists. Yes.
The honourable member for Bellechasse, Les Êtres-Lévis. Madam Speaker, Quebecers are suffering after 9 years of this Liberal government's wasteful spending and what that's doing to the cost of living. This Prime Minister's overspending knows no bounds, and the Bloc supports all the reckless spending. The Bloc voted to hire another 110,000 federal public servants. The Bloc is okay with sending Quebecers money to Ottawa, and they call themselves the defenders of Quebec. When will this Bloc-backed Prime Minister stop making Quebecers suffer even more?
We need more
with
defenders of
his
Canada
senseless
there
spending
someplace.
sprees? The Honourable Minister. Madam Speaker, my colleague is referring to sound management. Did you know that during his entire tenure, the Conservative leader, when he was Minister of Housing, built 6 affordable housing units? You saw that right, Madam Speaker, 6 units.
You know that's a pile of
In
BS.
Lévis, 205 affordable housing
I'm sure their
units have been
communication
built in
consultant
recent
came up
months.
with that number 6.
And we expect to build 8,000 under our deal with the government of Quebec. The honourable member for Bellechasse-les-Êtres-Lévis. After 9 years of this Liberal government, there's been 9 years of suffering for Quebecers, budget chaos, criminals on the
Why
loose,
is a
unaffordable
Conservative Party
food and
member
housing. And instead of
talking
thinking
about
fixing
nothing
the
but
budget,
Quebecers?
the
Is she there
Bloc
to represent Canada as
supports
well?
$500 billion in
that
reckless
really bothers me.
inflationary spending. The more this Bloc-backed
Cynthia,
government spends,
I'm glad
the
you
more
enjoy
Quebecers
this.
suffer. The Prime Minister and the
Because,
Bloc
yes, it is
aren't
better.
worth the cost. Could they spare a thought for Quebecers
And
and
to
stop
tell you the truth,
wasting
when I
their
worked at the
money?
House of Commons, we used
The
to
Honourable
swap in
Minister.
groups and tear down the BS
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
because
I'm
there's the only
so
way to
pleased
maintain
to have a
sanity.
second opportunity to
This is
talk about the
crazy.
205 affordable housing units that we have created in the members' riding because of the leadership of this government and the government of Quebec. 205 affordable units that have been built in the last few months. There's more coming, unfortunately, and this is less good news for the Conservative leader because during his
Yes, I
tenure,
know.
only
Just
6
6.
units of this
Yeah,
kind were built in
right.
the entire country. The honourable member for Pontigny. Madam Speaker, while Ottawa keeps saying all is well in the fight against climate change, the experts have never been so pessimistic. The Guardian surveyed 380 IPCC
Planet
climate
you live on,
specialists.
Monique.
77% of them believe global warming will surpass 2.5 degrees, far
Oh,
above the
no.
target set out in the Paris Agreement. More than 3 out of 4
What
experts believe
BS.
that governments and the oil lobby are leading us to a disaster. Meanwhile, this government inaugurates the Trans Mountain
These people,
Pipeline.
I don't know if
Do
these
they
people
have their
believe this. I
priorities
think
right?
idiots like this really
The Honourable
believe
Parliamentary
this,
Secretary.
this
Madam
blather.
Speaker,
But the
2
globalists
weeks
know it's
ago,
all a big charade. They know that.
our report showed
It's
that
all a
our
money-making
emissions were
scheme.
dropping. Under the Conservatives,
And it's an
they were
impoverishment
on an
scheme for the rest
uptick,
of us.
but we
It's
have
a way
changed
to
things, and
immiserate the
emissions are coming
masses.
down
That's what climate change propaganda
in
is all
Canada.
about. That's
So
what
we're
these people
doing
want to
what
do,
needs
to
to be
make your
done.
life
We're getting
miserable.
it right. We're on a good trajectory. And when you look
I'm not going to let them do it, though.
at the data, it shows the honourable member for Repentigny. 77% of climate experts think we're heading for disaster. Only 6% think there's still a chance of meeting the Paris targets. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, the Liberals are inaugurating their new tar sands oil pipeline, and we have the Conservative, whose only vaguely environmental measure is their crusade against Tim Hortons, paper straws, and lids. Frankly, it's pathetic. What's it going to take for Canada to listen to science and stop sabotaging the fight against climate change? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
They're not doing enough for you,
Madam
blockheads?
Speaker, I fully agree that when
More
you see
punishment,
that
the blockheads
Conservatives
scream.
are taking issue with Tim Hortons straws because they're trying to adjust to climate
It's
change
the
and
lids you
recycle
half-wit,
more.
not
I
the
really
straws.
don't understand their objection. But here on this side,
No,
it's
you don't
quite the
understand very
opposite.
much.
We
That's
are doing what needs
probably why
doing
you're up
to
talking
reduce
today.
emissions. And UN study shows that we're on the right track. So if the Bloc could keep working with us, we can have more clean energy here in Canada.
Lakes Brook.
Speaker, in Food Ontario's 2023 reports, over 800,000 Ontarians accessed food banks, up 38% from the previous year, which was the largest single year ever increase.
This must be Meet Your Unknown
Even
MP
worse,
today.
A report by Canada's food professor found that nearly 60% of Canadians are eating expired food to make ends meet. The cost of food, fueled by the carbon tax and inflation, are causing families to suffer. When will the Prime Minister admit his carbon tax scheme has failed and axe the tax?
When hell freezes over, that's when he'll admit it.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Disingenuous. That's what you call it when someone says they care about something but then do the exact opposite. That's today's Conservatives for you. They claim to
Actually,
care about
that's not what disingenuous means, Ryan.
oppose our plan to
I
feed
think you better consult your
400,000 more
dictionary
children
again.
per year. They claim to care about housing, but oppose our investments to build 3.9 million more homes by 2031. They claim to care about affordability, but oppose our investments to help Canadians with the cost of seeing a dentist, getting childcare, or accessing life-saving medication. It's clear Conservatives would make cuts that hurt families and a big
Member for Halliburton,
Okay, yeah, he shut the yoke off.
Policies are not working. I just talked about the rising cost of food. 3 out of 5 Canadians are eating expired food just to survive. More Ontarians than ever are using food banks. In my own area, the Kawartha Lakes Food Source reports that total visits to the food banks they serve have increased by 10% to almost 14,000. After 9 years of this carbon tax rhetoric, I get that it's hard for the Prime Minister to admit he's not worth the cost, but the facts speak for themselves. When will the Prime Minister admit his failed carbon tax doesn't work?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The facts are, Madam Speaker, that Conservatives will never stand up when they have the opportunity to support Canadians. They won't support feeding more hungry children. They won't support building more homes. They won't support access to life-saving medication. They are disingenuous at best. The hypocrisy is over the top. We see every day in this House that they complain, they holler from the other side, they play politics, they advance slogans and not solutions. Here we are standing up for Canadians. I don't know what they're doing on the other side.
Honourable Member for Red Deer, Lacombe.
Pretty pathetic
After 9
today.
years of reckless spending, Canadians are at a breaking point. With record demand at our food banks, we have now learned that 60% of Canadians have resorted to eating expired food. Yet this NDP Liberal government can't help themselves. They have hiked the carbon tax another 23% on April 1st as part of their plan to quadruple it by 2030. Why does this Prime Minister hate Canadians who just want to heat their home, feed their kids, and drive to work? Why won't he just axe the tax?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The last thing they want to do.
Madam Speaker, Conservatives talk down our economy every day in this House, while in reality, Canada's
Good
economy
reason
has
to.
shown great resilience despite the global shocks that it's been under. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio, the lowest deficit in the G7, a AAA credit rating that's been reaffirmed. Warren Buffett, while talking about investing in Canada, says we do not feel uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form putting money into Canada. The IMF, in the most recent fiscal
Nobody
monitor,
wants to
rated
invest in
Canada as
Canada.
#1 for budget balance. And this year's budget puts our healthy national balance sheet to work.
The Honourable Member for Moose
Boy.
Jaw, Lake Centre, Lanigan.
I love the way the speaker cuts them all off.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Food banks are on the brink. Demand is up and donations are down. The Moose Jaw Food Bank helped nearly 8,000 households in 2023, up 58%. Madam Speaker, Moose Jaw has a population of 33,000 people. The sad reality is that this is what this government has created. When will the Prime Minister axe a tax to make food affordable again for Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, it is so rich hearing the Conservatives again cite food bank lineups and continually rage farm off the suffering of Canadians. when they will not step up when given the opportunity to support feeding 400,000 more kids per year. This is something that I advocated for many years before getting into politics. I
Yeah.
know many
Meanwhile,
members of
you're
this
starting
House
a
are
famine
encouraged by the fact that our
in
government
Canada.
has made a $1 billion
There won't
commitment
be
to
any
feed more
food
hungry
to
children
feed
in this
these
country.
kids with
I don't
because of your
understand how the
policies.
Honourable Member for London
Because farmers
Fanshawe.
can't grow food anymore
Liberals
at
are
the
out of
rate
touch
they
with
need
everyday
to.
Canadians, and Conservatives are worse. After voting no to free medication, the member for Lambton Kent Middlesex wants people to know the real problem isn't that they have to pay out of pocket for care. No, the real problem is Tim Hortons and their new paper coffee cups. While new Democrats are getting free
It's the
dental
lid,
care
you
and
idiot.
care for Canadians, Liberals delay and Conservatives obstruct support for people. Oh, and also they blast coffee lids. Why is this government like the Conservatives so completely out to lunch with the reality of everyday Canadians?
She must have spent the whole weekend preparing
The
that
Honourable
question.
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for her advocacy. There's nothing more
And
fundamental.
if euthanasia czar's up.
There's nothing more fundamental than having the liberty and autonomy
Kill
over your
her.
own body. And it was so disappointing to see Conservative MPs out making speeches trying to tell our daughters and our sisters what they can do with their bodies.
So disappointing to see Conservative members standing up for the unborn because this killer won't do it. He wants to euthanize people and abort children.
Over her body, but to make sure that
He
she has
is
the
a
reproductive
nutcase.
medicine so she has full autonomy and control over her own body.
The Honourable Member for Fort
Yeah, except during COVID, you halfwit.
It's
Look at that.
National Caregiver Month, and
That flabby
50% of
halfwit.
women are taking care of their elderly parents or loved ones with a disability. And 1 in 5 of those caregivers report spending more than $1,000 a month to take care of their loved one. And these costs are only going up. The Liberals keep letting women down. For years, the Liberals promised families a simple, refundable caregiver tax
Hey,
credit.
Steve.
They haven't delivered.
Former
When
President
will the Liberals give
Donald
women
Trump
the
cut off
respect
U.S.
they
funding
deserve
for who?
and finally
It was
make the caregiver tax
reinitiated
credit
day
refundable?
one by Joe Biden.
The Honourable Parliamentary
It needs to have its funding
Madam
cut.
Speaker, our government
Let
has
Bill
stepped
and
up
Melinda
and
Gates
implemented the law.
fund
We have
the
introduced
WHO.
the disability benefit, and this benefit is the single largest line item in the budget, $6.1 billion over 6 years. This is an important first step, a step that will help Canadians alleviate poverty. We need to build upon this. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable, l'Honourable Député de Lac-Saint-Louis.
The Minister of Sport and Physical Activity has said all along that Canadians deserve a safe, inclusive, and welcoming sports system. Our sports system needs to be grounded in human rights. Accountability, integrity, and safety need to be at the center of sport governance and operations. Can the Minister update the House on her progress to create a safer sports system in Canada, one that reflects and celebrates our Canadian values?
The Honourable Minister of Sports.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've
Thanks
heard
for
very
joining us
clearly
today,
about the need
Cynthia.
for systemic reform and culture change in sport. Survivors have bravely come forward so that we can learn, better protect our kids, and improve our systems and processes. What's been going on in sport, the maltreatment, the abuse, the discrimination, is unacceptable and has to stop. And that's why we announced the creation of the Future in Sport Commission, the membership of which we announced yesterday. Madam Speaker, along with the member from Lac-Saint-Louis, all of us here in this House, indeed all Canadians, need to build for our children the sports system that's safe and that they deserve.
You're here.
Honourable Member for Langley Eldergrove.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, it is clear he is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. His radical experiment in British Columbia with taxpayer-funded hard drugs and legalized street drugs has led to more crime, chaos, and disorder. Common sense Conservatives have put forward a motion to put an end to this risky experimentation. So, will the Liberals vote with us to ban hard drugs and to offer recovery and hope instead? Yes.
L'Honourable Secrétaire Parlementaire.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. From the beginning, what we have offered is to help people through treatment, harm reduction, strengthening legislation. We are here to help people, to accompany them through their journeys. Everyone deserves full support. No one chooses to become addicted to drugs, and that's why we're there to help everyone.
Well, that's not necessarily true.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder caused by his wacko policies. It's wacko to allow
he might get
drug
thrown
use
out for
in
that.
parks, hospitals, and playgrounds. It's wacko that this government's policy is exposing kids and healthcare workers to lethal drugs. Will the Prime Minister and his government support
Good thing
our
Fergus
common
isn't there.
sense
He'd have
motion
this guy
to
thrown
ban
out
hard drugs and offer
for saying
recovery,
wacko, not
or
once
will
but
they
twice.
continue with his wacko drug
Oh,
policies
3 times.
of legalized use of meth and fentanyl in children's parks?
True, though. Very
The
true.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've engaged with experts with a range of views to learn from current experiences and inform this practice moving forward. We're working with all
What the
federally
hell is she
funded
talking
programs
about?
and have ramped up mitigation and enforcement measures. We expect provinces and territories to do the same, and the evaluation is ongoing. We will do what we need to do.
Perry, amen to that. Amen to that.
Madam Speaker, having eyes, why can't the Liberals
And my
and
sister was
NDP
one of
see
those,
the
Harry.
death and destruction the
And she's
radical
gone
drug
today.
experiment is having in Canada? Having ears, why can't they hear the cries of weeping parents and the loved ones of 42,000 who have died from opioids? When will the Liberals and NDP realize that their wacko safe supply and hard drug legalization is destroying this nation? Will they vote with common sense Conservatives to ban hard drugs, stop taxpayer-funded drugs, and put that money into detox and recovery?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente, c'est justement parce qu'on est...
Madam Speaker, we do listen to experts, and we are attuned to people's needs, the needs of those who are on the streets using drugs. That's why we have options and solutions like strengthening legislation, harm reduction, treatment, and supervised
Keep
consumption.
repeating the talking points.
Those are the steps we're taking.
Alberta cowgirl,
these
you're dead
Liberals
on
are
there.
more offended by their policies being called wacko than they are by finding needles on kids' soccer fields or skyrocketing overdose rates. Conservatives have put forward a motion calling on the government to ban hard drugs and offer recovery programs across Canada. Will this government vote in support of a common sense motion, or will they continue pearl clutching over words like wacko?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
We had such hopes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Harm reduction is healthcare. Harm reduction is the door to the system. Safe
The hell
consumption
does that
sites
mean?
have responded to more than 53,000 overdose since 2017.
That's a big
Our
joke, is
government
it?
has invested $200 billion to support provinces and territories, delivering services needed in addition to the $1 billion we have directly invested to address this crisis. We
Did
will
you-
use every tool at our disposal
Every
to
tools,
end
yes.
toxic drug and overdose
Did you see how she smirked and laughed when she talked about the overdoses? They don't even take it
Honourable Member for
seriously.
Saint-Jean.
Not their problem.
117 days. The federal government has been ignoring its civilian employees at Quebec's military bases for 117 days. They're on strike. Well, the government cannot ignore them anymore because their
Well, they're not there to
representatives
defend
from
Quebec
Saint-Jean,
itself,
Bagotville,
okay?
and Valcartier are here today.
Not just Quebec.
They're
No,
here
they're
to
there
ask
for
why
the whole
Quebecers have the
country.
lowest wages in
You probably
Canada,
don't know that, though.
to ask why Quebecers are treated like
Yeah,
second-rate
any thoughts
workers,
at all
and
between
to
that
ask why the
red
Liberals
dye
have been
job?
ignoring them for 117 days. Will the government level the pay scale and stop discriminating against Quebec employees in the forces? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Climate change is real. The hell?
I
Yes, I've
appreciate
heard
my
it's
colleague's question
real.
because it gives
It's
me
been
the
real for
opportunity
millennia.
to talk about an announcement we made
Keep
in
repeating the
April
Liberal talking points,
with
though. That's good.
the well-being services of the Canadian Armed Forces. We reached a settlement of non-public
Oh,
fund
now we have a
workers
troll.
in Kingston and
Yes, we do have a
Petawawa.
troll here.
This agreement we
But
reached
I believe in freedom
will
of speech, so
increase by
keep it up.
13.75% the salary over the next few years. No one is paid at minimum wage, and we hope that those who are on strike will reach a resolution, and we encourage them to come back to the table. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Historically, the majority of civilian employees in the forces have been women in Quebec, and they're right to wonder why the federal government is discriminating against them. For example, they're right to ask why a financial services assistant in Bagotville deserves $10 less than someone doing exactly the same job in Ottawa. Strikers are right to demand equal treatment on all Canadian Forces bases. And at a time when the armed forces are struggling to recruit, they should be demonstrating that they respect their employees.
Well,
They
T.O., we have a
are
troll on
ready
board
to come back to
for
the
sure
table.
now.
They will be
The
suggesting a
Conservatives
new
are too
contract
extreme.
at 3:30
What,
today.
for an
DND finally
NDP
listen to
caucus
them?
meeting?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Once again, I thank my colleague for her question, and I appreciate the question because we do know that it's possible to reach solutions and agreements together at the bargaining table like we did in Kingston, in Petawawa, and here in Ottawa. The agreement that was negotiated will significantly increase salaries by 13.75% over 3 years.
Those Conservatives
we
are
hope that
so
the
extreme.
striking parties will return to the bargaining table.
They can't even
Madam
march in a
Speaker,
pro-life
I wish
rally.
to thank all
That's how
employees
extreme they are.
working with our military bases and with our military families. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this Bloc Liberal government, the housing crisis is unprecedented. July 1st will go down in history, but not for the right reasons. This crisis is affecting not only large urban centres, but also our regions. In an article in La Presse this morning, the Quebec Police Association noted a significant increase in homelessness. This is a sad reality. It's caused by lack of housing and the rising cost of living. When will this Bloc-backed government stop announcing programs with even more bureaucracy and instead ensure that housing is built in the regions too? The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, Gina. Where was all that talk about bodily autonomy during the COVID-19 pandemic? We had no bodily autonomy. I had none.
The member
They forced me to get the vaccine.
who asked the question,
and I regret it.
Supports a plan in which we don't build affordable housing. The member is in favor of increasing tax rates for new apartment construction. That is not okay.
Yes,
Speaker.
Kelly, I know
Our
it's
plan
painful,
is to invest
especially when
and to
this
build affordable
Yahoo's on his
housing.
feet.
For example, we just reached a deal with Quebec to build 8,000 housing units. Meanwhile, Madam Speaker, the Conservative Party leader, when he was housing minister, he managed to build a grand total of 6 housing units throughout the country.
Yes,
the Honourable Member for Beauce.
That's the one
Madam
number they
Speaker,
can seem to remember.
at that
6.
point,
And 8 out of 10 Canadians are getting more back from the carbon tax rebate.
The
That's the other
should
number they can
really
remember.
follow the situation more closely.
Not much else,
After
though.
9 years, this government, with the support of the Bloc, has voted for $500 billion in centralizing inflationary budget spending that is driving up the price of everything, pushing more people into homelessness across Canada. The government's failure to control its spending is the cause of all these problems. Add to that a carbon tax, and you'll understand the situation today.
We're on the verge of a
When will this
nuclear war,
Bloc-backed
Gary,
Prime
and a
Minister stop
nuclear
wasting
war.
money so that
And this
Quebecers
is,
can start
we don't hear
living and
anything
eating
about
with
it in the
dignity
House
again?
of Commons. Just keep sending billions to
The Honourable
Ukraine.
Minister.
That's just how insane our
Thank you,
political
Madam
system
Speaker.
is.
I have a
So
great
just
deal
lost
of
14
respect
viewers
for
for saying
the member for Beauce. He used
Suppression.
to be the mayor of an important municipality in Beauce. Now, here's what I would like to know. How does he feel about the attitude of the Conservative leader? The Conservative leader, when he was housing minister, created a grand total of 6 housing units. And the leader of the opposition insults and continues to insult Quebec's municipalities and their leaders, calling them incompetent. How does he feel as former mayor of a Quebec municipality? How does he feel about being called incompetent by a Conservative leader who built only 6 housing units? The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent.
It's just amazing
Madam Speaker,
how banal
does
the discourse and the dialogue is in this House of Commons.
Has he heard of Natia Gagné? Natia Gagné is a woman who lives in a van. For the past few days, she's been living in a van. Why? Because she no longer has housing. There are 24,000 people in Montreal waiting for an affordable housing unit.
Yeah. You can all respond to the troll who's pretending to be a Montreal Canadien fan.
Plus 1, 9 years in government. Is he proud of his government's track record? Is he proud of the situation today caused by 9 years of his government? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member.
Careless.
He's another member that I have a great deal of respect for. He is well respected and
glamorize and glorify abortion.
Quebec, and I thank him for
They
bringing
need
up
their heads
Nathalie. There are
examined.
many
That's
Nathalies
the
and
part of their
people
body
like
they
her
should be looking
in
after.
Quebec who need housing. It's a difficult situation in 2024 in Quebec. That's why people need a government that invests in them, not an official opposition who insults municipalities. Does he feel that insulting Quebec's municipalities is a sign of respect? The Honourable Member for Saint-Léonard, Saint-Michel.
Madam Speaker, the Conservatives continue to show their true colors. The Conservative leader said he'd override the rights of Canadians by using the notwithstanding clause. On Tuesday,
What the hell do you
member
think
for
it's in the
Peace River
Constitution
West
for?
introduced a petition here in the House to restrict abortion access. And on the same day, every Conservative member voted against a bill that would provide contraceptives to women who can't otherwise afford it. And yesterday, coincidentally, an anti-choice March for Life protest was held here in Ottawa. Can the Minister of Health assure women across Canada?
Wait, what, should we ban that protest too, like you tried to ban the Freedom Convoy?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank
What do
the
you
member
what do you
for
got
her
to say?
incredible
Balding
advocacy,
euthanasias are
in making sure that women have autonomy over their own bodies. And
autonomy.
It's so disappointing on the one hand to see, and I understand over half the Conservative members are anti-choice, and to see them speaking about them telling our daughters and telling our sisters what they should do with their bodies. Now that's upsetting enough, but then in the same
No, it's what they should do with their children.
to vote against women being
Think
able
about
to get
that.
the
If
reproductive
you're
medicine
capable
they
of
need
thinking, you
means
have
that
wit.
they want them to have no choice whatsoever about their bodies, not a choice of
Honourable Member for St. Albert,
Good,
Edmonton.
shut the fuck up. Excuse my language.
The Minister of Employment pocketed money from his business partner, the same business partner that was lobbying the Minister's Department while securing $110 million in government contracts.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the minister actively hid this shady arrangement from the Ethics Commissioner. For 2 weeks, the minister has refused to answer the most basic question, so I will ask it again. How much did the minister pocket? How much? How much? How much?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Good question.
The member well knows that the minister has answered these questions, and of course he would not dare say the things that he just said in this chamber where he uses parliamentary privilege outside, because he knows to do so would have serious consequences.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Bring it on.
Madam Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the Canadian Armed Forces have 16,000 personnel vacancies and a crisis of morale, recruitment, and retention. That's why the Defence Committee unanimously voted to cancel the April 1st rent increase for base housing. Like other Canadians, our troops can't afford rent and groceries and know that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister show that he actually supports our troops and reverse the April 1st rent increase? Yes or no?
Here, here. Here, here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I'll take no lesson, and I mean no lesson from the Conservative.
No, Karen, this is not a replay. This is CPAC
They let
today.
defense spending drop below 1%. They voted against actually a salary increase for our members. They voted against funding for Ukraine. They voted against Operation Unifier. They voted against $40 billion for NORAD modernization, and they badly mismanaged our procurement for years. So, Madam Speaker, today in this House, I have no lesson to take from that side.
The Honourable Member for Oxford.
When asked by the media, the immigration minister clearly stated that all international students undergo a criminal record check to enter Canada. That is false. Police certificates are not mandatory for international students that enter our country thanks to this Liberal government. This immigration minister is following the exact same reckless path of his predecessor, who notoriously lost 1 million people. Why did the minister mislead Canadians? And can you tell us how many international students were let in without police clearances?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, for far too long, international students have been exploited and vulnerable from abuse and fraud. That's why we are taking concrete action. We implemented a new verification process to authenticate the acceptance letters. We raised financial requirements to ensure they are prepared for their lives in Canada. And recently, we announced a national cap on student visas. Madam Speaker, we have a responsibility to ensure international students are set up for success. And that's exactly what we're doing.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga East Cooksville.
Madam Speaker, international trade is very important for Canada, supporting roughly 1 in 6 jobs nationwide.
while Conservatives in this House voted against modernizing free trade with Ukraine, cheering on damaging and illegal bridge blockades, and supported Brexit, on this side of the House, we know that Canadian businesses, innovators, workers, and exporters benefit from a strong, stable, progressive, and rules-based international order. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade kindly update this House as to how the government is standing up for free trade on the global stage?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Had the honor of attending the OECD ministerial meeting where I met with key allies and stakeholders to discuss the importance of inclusive, resilient, and sustainable trade, especially in this space of rising populism and protectionism. We know that promoting free trade and investments grows the economy, creates good jobs right across Canada. And I'd like to thank the member for Mississauga East Cooksville for his important work as we work together to advance Canada's trade agenda. Thank you.
Honourable member for Esquimalt, Saanich Sioux.
Madam Speaker, this government promised to remove criminal records for simple possession of drugs for more than 250,000 Canadians. After 2 years, we are still waiting for the government to act because the Liberals are saying this is hard to do. You know what's hard, Madam Speaker? Not being able to get employment or housing or to travel to see loved ones because of a criminal record. These records disproportionately impact Indigenous and racialized Canadians and all those living in poverty. Will the Liberals keep their promise and meet the November legal deadline to make sure all of these simple possession records are removed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, I greatly appreciate that question, as our government agrees that, and we are committed to dealing with the systemic racism and discrimination that often is in our criminal justice system. It is why I welcome working with the member opposite to meet our November 2024 deadline to implement C5. Madam Speaker, we are working with partners like provinces and territories to do just that. There is more work to be done, but we are absolutely committed to creating a fair justice system because that creates safer communities.
À la suite de discussions entre les représentants.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand that there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of Rex Murphy.
Honourable members to rise.
Anyway.
J'invite maintenant l'honorable député.
Anyway, thank you so much for watching today. That was a chance to catch up because I didn't do question period on Friday, and I was doing other things. So I thought we would do Fridays today. As somebody cleverly noticed, I just wanted to see if anybody would notice that it was actually Fridays. We don't always do Fridays, but it was fun getting together today, trading some ideas, having the discourse, and doing a little bit of introduction. Actually, the House is not sitting this week, so I'm going to try to get some committee meetings over to you and do some more interviews. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here today, and we will get back to normal next week, and we will be continuing to broadcast on a number of issues throughout this week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with a broadcast.